Hello and welcome to 5-Minute Math. Today we are looking at the 6th grade concept of wholes, parts, and percents. This is standard 6.5b in the great state of Texas, and we are using item number 7 of the 2022 released STAAR test. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and take a moment to pause the video, work this problem out on your own, unpause it, and we will look at our answers together. So this is a pretty straightforward problem here. We've got a 90-minute school play. Then the main character was on stage 80% of the time, so we need to turn that 80% of 90 minutes into actual minutes. And we've got 4 different options there. But what does this mean here when we take 80% of a number? Well, let me see if I can visually draw it for us here. All right, so if I were to draw a rectangle here, and I'm going to break it up into 10 parts. I'm going to do 2 rows of 5. There we go. So let's get one more row. All right, one more column, I mean. So there we go. I've got tenths. Now, if I were to shade in 80%, right, of this particular box, well, we would know that I would need to shade in 8 of these squares, because most of us intuitively know that 100% equals 1 whole. So when we're dealing with percents, we're actually dealing with less than a whole. So 80%, right, is actually 8 tenths. And so I didn't shade in the whole thing. That would have been 100%. I shaded in most of it. 80% is definitely more than half of it. And so here's a big learning for us, that this particular percent we can actually take over 10, but any percent you can actually take over 100, because 100 is the whole. So like if you wanted to do, let's give another example, 73%, right? You could make that 73 over 100, since 100 is the whole. So this 80, really what I did is I just did 80 over 100. And then you can just kind of, divide both sides by 10, take a 0 off the top and bottom, and you get 8 tenths. So that's what I did. Now, how does that help us with this particular problem? Well, if I can get this percent into a fraction, 8 tenths, take a look at my denominator, tenths. We also know that when we're dealing with place value, we've got our ones place, we've got our tenths place, we have our hundredths place. So if we can get our denominator into tenths or hundredths, it's an easy switch over to a decimal. So like this 73 hundredths, right, would be 0.73. I'm looking for my 8 tenths, and it's going to be 0.8. So what if I did this? What if I said 80% is the same as 0.8? And I need to find 0.8 of 90. Now that is a multiplication problem, and we could do multiplication. So let's do 90 times 0.8. I don't need that 0 in the front, so I'm just going to do 0.8. And that's going to be 0, and that is going to be 72. Now here's the tricky part, is that looks like 720. We now look at the decimals. How many digits are behind the decimal in my 2 factors? Well, I've got no digits behind the decimal in that factor because it's just 90. I have 1 digit behind the decimal in this factor, which means I've got 1 total between the 2 factors. I need to have 1 digit behind the decimal in my product. So 80% of 90, that makes sense. It's going to be less than 90. It's 72. So it's definitely more than half of 90. Half of 90 would be 45, but it's not the whole thing. So really, this B doesn't even make any sense. But my answer here is D.